Hello and welcome. My name is Xodas, and today I want to do a Frosty K PvP guide. So we're going to go over everything you need to know about how to successfully PvP in the Shadowlands as a Frost Death Knight. Without any further ado, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more Frosty K content like this. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, so one of the first things that I want to talk about is dual wield versus two-hander. So I've had a lot of people ask this. If you want to see the full breakdown video where I kind of go over it and kind of damage allocation and how it all kind of works much more in depth, a full video dedicated to this topic, it'll be up in the corner, up in this corner actually of the video. So go ahead and go check that out after the video or something like that. Just make sure you come back and watch this one. But for the TLDR, essentially in PvP, two-hand is better. Without a question, it is definitely better. And the reason why is that dual wield offers a higher consistent DPS. You're going to see better consistent DPS, but what you're going to also see is lower burst. On top of that is a matter of damage allocation. If you are running two-hand, then your individual hits will hit harder, and this will give a much more bursty kind of feel. This changes the way, of course, it feels to you, but this also changes the way that damage is allocated on your opponent. You do actually hit for harder. You do actually do more damage as a two-hand Frost DK, but it's allocated into your burst window. Whereas with a dual wield Frost DK, you're going to do very similar damage. Frankly, the DPS between the two are almost, over time, almost completely the same. The only difference really, like truly, without getting like splitting hairs and going down to 1 or 2% differences, is honestly where that damage is allocated at. Dual wield is going to have a much steadier flat line of damage, where two-hand is going to have a much spikier kind of damage with lots of peaks. There's going to be burstier. That's the best that I can describe it to you. If you want to learn more, check out that video. All right, so first off, for the rotation, it's really simple. Frost DK doesn't have a tremendous rotation. However, I'm not going to go fully in depth here because that is quite a big subject. So up here in the corner is a video entirely dedicated to resource management and basically how to do your base rotation perfectly. So if you want to see that, right up here in the corner. So the TLDR, however, is basically you build up runic power with Obliterate, and then you spend runic power with Frost Strike. Spending runic power gives you runes back, and spending runes gives you runic power. It is a cycle of life, and the best thing you can do is manage that cycle by weaving your Obliterates and your Frost Strikes. And what this means is doing something that looks like Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike. In an opener, this will be 2 Obliterates followed by a Frost Strike, followed by an Obliterate, followed by a Frost Strike. This is pretty much the bread and butter of our rotation. And then from there, you're just mixing in other abilities as they come off cooldown and as they're needed. For example, like using Howling Blast when it procs and using Remorseless Winter literally on cooldown. Every single time it comes off cooldown, you just press that button. So that's the TLDR of the rotation. Let's talk a little bit about surviving, because that's quite a big topic in itself, and it's something that's extremely important to your success as a Frost DK in PvP right now. First thing is having a solid Lichborn macro. This is a macro right here. It is going to cast your Lichborn ability, and then it is going to cast Hypothermic Presence if you're specced into it. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then it will cast Death Coils at you without having to target yourself or do anything weird like that. You just spam the button, and the first click will cast Lichborn Hypothermic. The second click will cast a Death Coil, and then you just spam it over and over and over again until your Lichborn is over. In order to get the most out of Lichborn, the first thing you want to do is go into it with at least a half full runic power bar, if not full. You want as much runic power as you possibly can before you pop Lichborn, because you have precious seconds to squeeze Death Coils out of it. Then from there, it's just a matter of not consuming all of your global cooldowns with Obliterates, leaving space for you to actually cast that Death Coil on yourself. And if you compare this up with something that increases your strength, like Pillar of Frost, or even the proc from our Fallen Crusader Runeforge, which you can track by looking up here, or you can track it with a weak aura like mine. If you do all this properly and you pair it with something that increases your strength, which basically increases the amount of healing that your Death Coils individually do, then what you see is you can get a pretty big chunky heal, easily for more than 100% of my health bar, meaning I can easily top myself with a Lichborn heal, and that is absolutely massive and is going to be super important to surviving as a Frost DK. Without using Lichborn properly, you are going to get destroyed most of the time. Other than that, you want to make sure that you're using your Raised Dead and your new ability Sacrificial Pack. This is super important. This is another form of instant healing. It gives you 20% of your health back. So this is very important. I like to throw my Raised Dead out there as a offensive cooldown. However, I make sure I'm watching that timer, and if I see that my zombie is about to expire, I go ahead and sacrifice it and get my health back. Other than that, it's just a matter of making sure that you're using your cooldowns at the right time. AMS to negate magic damage, ICB or Icebound Fortitude to mitigate physical damage or to get out of a stun. AMZ is going to be super important, super important for more magic damage mitigation, and this is not only for you but also for your team as well. It's a great thing to drop whenever mages are bursting, especially as frost mages, those big frozen orbs, lots of comet storms and blizzards and all kinds of things going on. You can do a massive service to your team just by using AMZ or Anti-Magic Zone. And finally, of course, there's Death Strike. Death Strike doesn't heal for a lot anymore. It's been nerfed quite a bit. It only heals for 5% of your HP. However, it is still a powerful ability to use, and is something that I find myself weaving into my regular rotation as I feel it is needed, and it helps a lot with just managing how much damage I'm taking, managing my health pool, and making sure that I'm able to stay in the fight for as long as possible. So it's important to kind of learn what is when should you be death striking, how does it, how much does it actually heal you for, understanding, are you going to overheal, is this a good time to heal? And that's really something that only comes with experience and not really something I can actually tell you. So you just got to practice and play with it, keep it somewhere handy so you can weave it easily into your rotation, and find a good point where you don't feel like your damage is suffering too much, but you're getting a good payoff in your healing and how long you're actually surviving in your individual fights. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about talents. This is extremely important. If you pick the wrong talents, then you are going to be severely gimped, severely. So let's go ahead and go over these. First of all, we are taking Inexorable Assault. This increases our single target pressure and increases our burst damage and is extremely important. It is by far the best. Icy Talons is a trap. It doesn't matter if you're dual wield or two-hander. This is a complete and total trap. Do not fall into it. And Cold Heart is only for PvE. For the second row, as a two-hand Frost DK, I highly suggest Murderous Efficiency. This just allows us to get more obliterates out. And since we aren't a very fast attacking spec like dual wield Frost DK is, for example, you're going to get a lot more out of being able to get more obliterates than you will off of something like Runic Attenuation, which is based off of attack speed. For such slow hitters that we really need those obliterate hits to drive more resource regeneration, and not rely on something that's only going to happen every few seconds based on your weapon attack speed. For the level 30 row, you're generally always going to want to run Asphyxiate. In arenas, there's plenty of times where Blinding Sleet can be very useful, especially to set up a large kill streak opportunity. However, right now we're in BGs, and in general in arena, I highly suggest Asphyxiate. It's a very strong stun. For the level 35 row, you really want to run Avalanche. This increases our burst pressure even more, and is definitely very nice. Frozen Pulse is also a good contender, and is a very popular choice in Mythic Plus and PvE in general, because of the duration and length of fights in PvE. However, in much shorter-lived fights in PvP, what we see is Avalanche pulls through as a much better, much quicker source of damage. For the level 40 row, you really want to run Death Pact. Death Pact is a lifesaver. It does have its set downside in that healing absorb. However, if you use it properly, you barely even notice the absorb, and it will definitely save your life more times than not as a really good oh shit button. So I really suggest that you keep this one around. And when it comes to avoiding the downsides of its healing absorption, what I suggest you do is I suggest you hold on to it until it's your final defensive cooldown. I'm looking at healing myself. I'm looking at using Lichborn. Lichborn's going to be the first healing ability that I'm going to turn to try and save myself. Once that Lichborn's up, if I still need more healing or a little bit down the fight when Lichborn is still on cooldown, then my next thing I'm going to want to do is raise dead and then sacrifice that ghoul for 20% health. The final thing I ever do is Death Pact, because if I Death Pact first and then go into a Lichborn, 30% of that Lichborn is going to be absorbed by Death Pact. If I Death Pact first and then sack my ghoul, then that 20% HP heal from sacking that ghoul goes entirely into the 30%, and I don't even see a heal. So you want to save Death Pact for the very last moment, or in a time when you are getting blown up in the opener and you need to press that oh shit button as soon as possible to keep yourself from dying. Those are the only times that I ever find myself pushing it, and it happens quite a bit, and it saves me almost every time. That's how you use Death Pact without it completely screwing you over. For your level 45 row, we actually have a pretty decent choice here, and that's between Gathering Storm, Hypothermic Presence, and Glacial Advance. All three of these abilities are useful in PvP. They're just useful in different ways at different times. So let's go ahead and go over that. First, Gathering Storm is an amazing talent for getting out as much damage as possible in as short amount of time as possible. Right now in Battlegrounds and in the quick meta that we have right now, where we still have a lot of classes that are absolutely dumpstering people, the meta is fast-paced gameplay, very short fights. You're going to want Gathering Storm because this is going to add as much DPS into your burst window as possible, and is going to also uplift your consistent pressure so that you're not feeling like you need to rely on cooldowns just to land a kill. You're more or less relying on Remorseless Winter, and if you have them, then your cooldowns to secure a kill. Hypothermic Presence, on the other hand, is absolutely amazing for its defensive ability. This ability is amazing when you pair it with your Lichborn, which is why earlier when I showed you the Lichborn macro, why I said that you should have Hypothermic Presence in it, because when you run Hypothermic Presence, you're able to get an extra 2 to 3 death coils out of that Lichborn window, and that's massive. That's like 30 to 45% of your HP right there. So it's really important that you know when to run Hypothermic. I suggest you run it anytime you're in 2s, anytime you're in kind of medium length combat where that heal is really important. Duels is a great example of this. 1v1 combat, medium length combat kind of stuff. You don't have a healer, you need that extra survivability. If you're under geared, this is a great ability to run. There's a lot of times when you're just going to need that extra bit of healing, and that's when you're going to want that Hypothermic Presence. And finally, Glacial Advance is an absolute killer in 3s. That's my favorite place to run it right now, is in 3s. And the reason why is because Glacial Advance really relies on having a longer battle in order to actually build those stacks up and then burst. And the reason that you're probably scratching your head, why an AoE ability, especially such an expensive one on a CD, and the reason why is because it now applies Razor Ice to the target, and that's super important. It applies Razor Ice to all targets that it hits. So this means that in 3s, what you're looking at is you might pop something like Pillar of Frost in the very beginning while you build up your Glacial Advance stacks. Once your Glacial Advance is at 5 stacks, you've got 5 stacks of Razor Ice on the target, they now take 15% extra frost damage. This is when, by now, your Pillar of Frost should be off cooldown or very soon to come off cooldown. This is when you would go ahead and pop every burst cooldown you have. You'll go ahead and pop the Empower Rune Weapon, the Pillar of Frost, Frostward's Fury, the A-Bomb Limb, or whatever your current Covenant ability is. That's when you come in with all the heavy hitting abilities and you take advantage of that 15%. But you need a longer battle in order to pull that off. And you also got to sacrifice the healing potential of Hypothermic for it. This is where 3s comes in, because you have a healer, the battles are more longer length, and it just gives you an opportunity to actually get those stacks built up and really take advantage of them. For your final row in PvP, there is really only one option, no matter how you like to play your Frost DK, two-handed or dual wield. Obliteration is absolutely killer. The whole point of Obliteration, and this goes back to the weaving thing that I was talking about before, is you hit Frost Strike and to obliterate. And Obliteration makes your Frost Strikes and your Howling Blast give you a Killing Machine proc, which of course, as we all know, makes our Obliterate guaranteed to crit. So you weave your Frost Strike into Obliterate, Howling Blast into Obliterate, Frost Strike into Obliterate, so on and so forth, and you're able to squeeze out a ton of single target pressure. It's absolutely huge. Our Obliterates do so much damage, it's not even funny. And so for this reason, Obliteration is the most important talent in this entire tree, and you're definitely going to want to run it. Breath of Sindragosa is not as good because it is on a very long cooldown in PvP terms. On top of that, you do need to have a lot of runic power banked in order to actually use this ability and maintain it. And that kind of hurts you when you consider that to survive in PvP, you have to spend runic power, whether it's in Death Strikes or whether it's in Lichborns. You've got to spend that runic power to heal yourself and to keep yourself alive, and you can't do that while maintaining a minute-long Breath of Sindragosa. You just can't do it. On top of that, as you face better players will understand the weakness of Breath of Sindragosa is to kite it, is to stun you, CC you any way possible, and basically make it to where you can't hit anything, so you run out of runic power, and you can't hit them, so you can't do any damage, and so they just completely shut you down. Any player worth their salt knows how to do this, and will do it to you over and over and over again, and it is almost always very effective. So now, time for PvP talents, and this one is a lot simpler. So basically, this right here is my favorite BG build at the moment, and as you can see, it relies, of course, Chill Streak. Chill Streak's permanently slotted in there. It's not like BFA, thankfully, where you had to rely on Chill Streak to get kills, but it is now a very strong complement to our toolkit, and will absolutely mess people up if you get a good, solid Chill Streak in. So that's permanently slotted in there. Just do not remove it unless you're doing duels or other kind of 1v1 content where you're going up against someone who doesn't have a pet that you could potentially Chill Streak off of. As for our others, Necrotic Aura and Heartstop Aura are two of the go-tos. Pretty regularly find myself using. They're very good. And what if I do change anything? Generally, I'm changing something like this. I'm going to this kind of build for a Dome of the Ancient Shadow, which increases the absorb on AMZ by 60%, making an 80% absorb altogether. That is absolutely massive. Other good PvP talents that you will find yourself wanting to use at different points is stuff like Transfusion for even more Death Strikes. Sometimes I do feel like it's a little over the top, a little too much defensive. I find myself doing less damage when I take this because I'm just so busy healing myself all the time because I have all of these cooldowns at my disposal to do so. So I just find myself using it, and that means it does, to me, kill our damage at times and feel like maybe a little too much. However, there are very specific scenarios where having a transfusion is absolutely amazing. Delirium's another really good one. This is one that's super useful, especially in arena when you're going up against monks or demon hunters or druids, anything with a lot of mobility. Delirium, of course, increases the cooldown recovery rate of movement enhancing abilities like blink, sprint, roll, chi torpedo, anything like that. This is going to slow down the cooldown recovery rate of those abilities so that they can get fewer of them out over the course of a match. This is something I find very useful in that case. However, outside of that, I don't really find myself using a lot of the other talents. Dark Simulacrum is nice, however, most people have wisened up to it. It is dispellable, so most people don't find themselves, falling for it too often. However, it is nice to get a good Dark Simulacrum in every now and again. Cadaver's Pallor is pretty much a trap. It is kind of useful against heavy dot cleaves, like literally like 2 dot classes. Very useful there. However, that isn't very common and isn't always the best choice, even in that scenario. Something I find myself using very, very rarely. Dead of Winter is a horrible talent. It's absolutely awful because we rely so much on Remorseless Winter in so many cases, and this increases the cooldown of that ability. However, the stun on it is very nice. However, also few people actually fall for it because they know that it will stun them after it hits them 5 times. So you've got to kind of balance out, okay, most people don't fall for it. It takes away some of our damage because it makes it a longer cooldown. And ultimately, I don't really ever take this except for when I'm going up against players at a very low rating and I just feel like memeing them and going for the cheese. Sometimes it works and I stun the entire team and it's a blast. Other times it fails miserably and we lose because I don't have the damage. So it's definitely a balance as to whether or not you actually want to take that. Alright, so now let's talk about Legendaries and some other Shadowlands specific systems. So first of all is Legendaries. Legendaries are not available yet. They will be available this coming Tuesday, and I'm super excited, as I'm sure most of you are as well. There's a lot of cool Legendaries, and there are 4 that are on my kind of radar as things I want. It's these first 4 right here. But when it comes to PvP specifically, there's really only 2 that I'm actually wanting for PvP, and it is Kultira's Favor and Absolute Zero. Kultira's Favor, obviously, because it increases the damage of Obliterate, and that's obviously amazing. It's amazing. I want that extra damage. I loved it in the beta. It was the best PvP one in a beta for just doing the most amount of damage. But another one that's on my radar, and one that is probably a little bit better, especially at the higher rated arena brackets, is Absolute Zero. Absolute Zero is a bit of a sleeper. It reduces the cooldown of Frostborn's Fury by 50%, which takes it from a 3-minute cooldown down to a 1.5-minute cooldown. And on top of that, when you use it, it freezes all enemies, which is a stun, for 3 seconds. It is absolutely insane. I had a lot of fun using it on the beta. Those of you who watched me on the beta or watched Mez on the beta, there's been a lot of DKs using Absolute Zero. And this is what I'm guessing is going to be the #1 pick for most high-rated Frost DKs, because it allows you to set up your own chill streaks. You're able to just stun the entire enemy team if you have good aim, and then you're able to just dump a giant chill streak into them. It does a ton of damage just from the Frostborn's Fury alone, and combining that with a chill streak is absolutely massive. So definitely keep your eye on that one. If you're wondering where to get any legendary, all you've got to do is come here to your adventure guide, go to powers, and then find it in the list, mouse over it, and it'll tell you the source is for the Absolute Zero, drops from Torghast, Tower of the Damned, Cold Heart Interstitia, Layer 3+. So now I know where I need to go to grind this bad boy out. Alright, so now let's talk about Covenants. Covenants is a pretty easy one for PvP. You either want Kyrian or you want Necrolord, and it depends on a couple of different things. First of all, Necrolord gives you the insane mechanical strength of being able to grip multiple people at a time. That is insanely powerful. Do not underestimate the power of it. It disrupts an entire enemy team. It disrupts their casters, their healers. It is absolutely amazing. It is useful all the time. I've gotten so much use out of it already. It's blown me away. Its mechanical strength is insane, through the roof. His damage ain't too shabby either. And on top of that, if you take the Soulbind, which I haven't unlocked it yet, it does take some time to actually unlock it, but Emony's first Soulbind is Lead by Example, and it increases your strength by 5%, increases your ally's strength by 2%, and increases your strength by an extra 2% for every ally that it affects. This is huge. You can get a lot of strength out of this, but probably the most important thing is that this is percentage based. So that means that this will grow with you. As you get more gear, as your strength value increases, you will actually get more strength when you pop your A-bomb limb. That's amazing. It's an ability that grows with you. That is extremely powerful. On top of that, because this is strength and not something like mastery or haste, that means that it won't ever DR. Something new to Shadowlands is that secondary stats DR. They DR quite heavily past 30%. That means that once you get to 30% with a stat, then everything you add on top of that is going to just kind of get DR'd away to a certain extent. The more that stat you get, the more heavier of a diminishing return is. So you could get to a point where you add mastery to your character and you actually lose mastery. That's the way the brackets work. I'll show a little screenshot on the screen right now of what those DR brackets are, and you can find a link to that article down in the description below. So because this doesn't DR and because it grows with you, this 5% strength gain is absolutely massive, and it is very, very powerful, and I can't wait to unlock it so that I can use it here, because on the beta it was absolutely kick-ass. Other than the Necrolords, your other option that's viable is the Kyrian. The Kyrian are powerful because they have high single target damage on a very short 1-minute cooldown. It's not bad damage. It's not as impressive as A-Bomb Limb, but it's not bad either. The main thing that you want from them, however, is the Pelagos Soulbind ability, which basically gives you 350 mastery when you pop that ability. So that's a 350 mastery for 20-ish seconds every minute. That is really powerful because, as we all know, a lot of our damage is frost damage, and that is increased by our mastery. And also our obliterate with killing machines now do frost damage as well. So this is huge for just increasing your damage across the board. However, it is a set 350 mastery. So that means that mastery buff will actually become less impressive over time as our natural base mastery kind of goes up and starts to kind of eclipse the new stat bonus that you get from popping your Kyrian ability. And since mastery is also a secondary stat, that also means that above 30%, it gets DR'd. And if you're going to add something like 350 mastery, which is essentially doubling your mastery value, then that's going to be DR'd very significantly. To give you an idea of where our currently at with itemization, I have 174 item level, and I have 44% mastery, well over the point where mastery starts to DR. If I run the Kyrian ability, rather than getting the extra 40-ish% mastery that I should get from the ability, I will instead get a more like 10 to 20%. And as my gear gets better and I acquire more base mastery, then the bonus I get from the Kyrian ability will actually diminish in value over time. Ultimately, I think the Necrolords win this battle, especially when you're considering several months from now, or even a few patches from now, or even late expansion, and not just thinking about right now in the moment where 350 mastery is huge. As for the other covenants in PvP, sadly, they are pretty much not viable. Night Fae requires people to stand into death and decay, which is not going to happen. It's just not. And on top of that, even if they do, the damage from that ability and from your Obliterate's cleaving is really nothing to write home about, in my opinion. It's not going to get you very far, not going to last very long. Venthyr, on the other hand, isn't very useful in PvP because it really relies on having multiple targets in order to give you as much runic power back as possible. Using it on a single target scenario or even a 2-target scenario is going to give you very little runic power and is ultimately going to feel like kind of a dead button press. The 8% dodge isn't bad, but ultimately it does mean that you find yourself wanting to save Swarming Mist for a more defensive scenario rather than using it with your offensive cooldowns to try and do more damage. Now let's talk a little bit about conduits. Conduits is definitely something that I know a lot of you guys are very curious about. I clicked the wrong button. So let's go ahead and talk about some important ones. First of all, you should use whatever conduits you get access to first that you think are the best, because it's very random as to what conduits you're going to get. You don't really know. You just kind of use what you have available. Conduits to keep your eye out for, though, are definitely Insatiable Appetite, which increases the minimum healing of Death Strike. This is absolutely massive and very important. As soon as I unlock a defensive endurance conduit, the first thing I'll do is put Insatiable Appetite in this. This is pretty much the only endurance conduit that I ever use. It's truly the best for many, many reasons, consistency-wise. However, the ICB one isn't too bad either. For finesse, the only one that I even consider or even think about is the Fleeting Wind. This is very much my own personal opinion. I find the usefulness of having that increased movement speed for 3 seconds to be absolutely massive and really does help me out a lot. So personally, this is my favorite. And as far as potency goes, the ones that you really want to keep your eye out on are Eradicating Blow, which increases your Frost Strike damage, Unleash Frenzy, which increases your strength by 3% or so. This one isn't going to be too good until a little bit later on when we get better versions of this conduit that give more strength. I think that's going to make this a little bit better for sure. However, at the moment, it's definitely not a bad one. Another potency conduit to really keep your eye out for is the one that reduces the cooldown of your Empower Rune weapon and increases its haste percent given. That's very strong. It increases your burst potential because you get more haste in your burst, and it makes it to where you can pop Empower Rune weapon more often, which is awesome. So definitely keep your eye out for that one as well. Other than that, for right now, when we don't have access to many conduits, I would just say use what becomes available to you and what you think is best. Wait until the simulation bots come out. They're gonna find the perfect ones and all that kind of stuff. And other than that, just kind of enjoy it and use what you've got. I got very lucky and got a purple Eradicating Blow, and this thing is crazy. I do that was such a huge DPS boost getting that. Absolutely crazy. So just use what you get. If RNG, blesses you and gives you a purple one, go for it. Yeah, and just have fun with it. And finally, the final thing that we need to talk about when it comes to PvP as a Frost DK is gearing and itemization. So first of all, I'm currently at a 174 item level. I have been working very, very hard to get that. And basically the path that I took to get here was I did BGs to build up enough honor to buy the pieces of honor gear that have the perfect stats. Our perfect stats for PvP is Verse Mastery, period. You want as much Verse as you can possibly get, as much Mastery as you can possibly get. Right now I am in some PvE gear, and I'll tell you why here in a moment. But basically I got a full set of Verse Mastery gear, and that's where I began. There's only a few pieces on the PvP vendor that actually has Verse Mastery. It's like 4 or 5 pieces. So I bought those 4 or 5 pieces and my PvP weapon, and I upgraded them all the way to rank 3, the highest that you can possibly do right now. Once I did that, then I went straight into Mythic Zeros with my guild. If you're not with a guild or have a group of friends to run Mythic Zeros with, then I highly suggest you just go straight into Heroic gear and into Heroic Dungeon gear. And from there, I just farmed out all of my mythic zeros for the week and did as many heroics I could fit into that to get as many other pieces of gear as I possibly could. At the end of the day, this meant that I had a full verse mastery set for PvP. However, something I learned literally today, just a few hours ago, is I was testing it out in a BG, and my damage with my PvE gear, which has the wrong stats, the very wrong stats for PvE, this gear is actually giving me much more damage in Battlegrounds than my PvP stat gear is, with more versatility. So right now it looks like, because in BGs there's no PvP scaling, PvP scaling only exists in Arena, so it looks like in BGs, for at least the moment, item level is really king, not stats. You are going to want mastery on every single piece, and I still do, but I have sacrificed quite a bit of versatility, dropping from 17% down to 11% to increase my item level as high as I possibly could with all of this mythic zero gear, all these 184s. And by doing so, I have just found myself melting through enemies like butter. So I highly suggest getting that start in BGs. Getting your PvP gear is actually really easy, really quick to farm up that PvP gear and to get it upgraded, and then go into heroic dungeons or go into mythic zeros, whatever makes most sense for you, and collect the highest item level gear you can. Wear everything with mastery. Don't ever put anything on your character without mastery on it, unless it's like a trinket or a weapon. Currently, there is no weapon in the entire game that has versatility mastery or any kind of mastery at all. It's all haste versatility. So right now, that's the best you can get. Other than that, though, you want mastery on every single piece of gear, and what you'll see is you'll have a mastery of about 44% or even higher. For my friend Hayes, who has full heroic, full mythic zero gear, he's got much more gear than me. He's like 2 item level points ahead of me, which is actually quite a lot right now. He's got all the way at 49% mastery. It's absolutely insane. So you want as much mastery as you can possibly get, paired with as much versatility as you can possibly get, paired with the highest item level you can possibly get. Little confusing, I know, I'm sorry, but that's what itemization and gearing is looking like right now. So I almost forgot, but there's one other thing that we need to talk about, and that is Runeforges. This is a question I get asked a lot, so let's go ahead and answer that for you. When it comes to PvP, as a two-hander, there's only 2 choices really when it comes to what Runeforge you want to use. The first one is the Rune of Fallen Crusader, which is the one that of course we've used forever. This is going to increase your burst pressure quite a bit, and if you are running the Necrolord Covenant like me, then something else to keep in mind is that this increases your strength by 15%, and that means it grows with you as well. And when you pop that Maldraxxus ability and you have this, you have Rune of the Fallen Crusader procced at the same time, then that means that that 5% strength buff from the Necrolord ability is going to stack with this 15% buff, and you're just going to get bukus of strength out of it. Percent on top of percent equals very big smiley face. Very good. Very, very good. And I highly suggest that this is the one that you should probably run. However, there is another option that is also quite popular, and that is running Razor Ice. And there's nothing wrong with running Razor Ice. Razor Ice is a viable option. However, what you see is a different damage allocation. What I mean by that is where Fallen Crusader increases your burst pressure quite significantly, actually. And what you see with Razor Ice is a little bit more consistency, actually a fair amount more consistency, more consistent DPS. However, your burst won't be as impressive as someone who has Fallen Crusader, and someone who has Fallen Crusader's consistent DPS won't be as impressive as someone who's running Razor Ice, assuming both players are of similar skill levels. For you dual wielders out there, it is very important that you run both Razor Ice and Fallen Crusader, with Fallen Crusader being on your main hand weapon, which your main hand weapon should always be your highest item level weapon. That's what you want to be doing for dual wield. There pretty much isn't any other options for PvP. That is the most well-rounded, well-balanced choice. There is maybe an argument for adding Hysteria or Sanguination into there. Ultimately, those are much more specialized and niche combos to run, and won't serve you as well generally as something like Fallen Crusader and Razor Ice will. Anyways, guys, that was a huge video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I hope that this video helps you to kick some serious butt in PvP on your Frost DK. And without any further ado, I hope you have a great one. Catch you next time.